views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am Daren, Jaime, and if you're asking the question, what are the Social Justice Forums about? Well, it's a show that takes a look at a lot of the inequities that people face. We promote civic engagement. We have some very capable guests who go in depth and give us a little bit more about their organization and the work that's going on. And then we also promote civic engagement. So we encourage you to stay with us. We got a good show coming up. The Social Justice Forums begins right now. Welcome back. The Alliance to End Hunger is an organization that deals with diverse institutions to build the public and political will to end hunger at home and also abroad. Now, the Alliance fosters strategic partnerships overcoming hunger, building political commitment from our leaders, as well as what to do in terms of ending hunger, creating global connections with the UN International Alliance Against Hunger as well. And joining us now to share more details, we're pleased to have for the coalitions and advocacy and Alliance to End Hunger, Minerva Delgado. And Minerva, glad to have you here with us on the Social Justice Forums.
Thank you so much, Daren. Such a pleasure to meet you. And I'm thrilled to be here. The Alliance to End Hunger is in DC, but I'm from the Bronx, so I'm actually extra thrilled to meet you today and just want to wish you and your viewers happy holidays.
Thank you so much, and glad to have you sharing with us during this holiday season. Walk us through, I gave a little bit of our viewers a little bit of an intro. You talked about being in DC as well as the Bronx, but share with us a little bit more about the work that goes on with the Alliance to End Hunger.
Absolutely. So the Alliance to End Hunger is a multi-sector collaborative. We have about 100 organizations that are part of our collaborative, and they are national nonprofits, international NGOs, corporations, universities, foundations. And so we are sort of the big tent around which organizations can come together to collaborate and advocate against hunger. And, you know, our mission is to unite these diverse sectors to address hunger and malnutrition needs today, but also look forward to solving the root causes of hunger. And I would like to offer a definition. I'm going to use the term hunger because it's very relatable. Everyone understands hunger at a very deep level and what that means. But I'm also talking about food insecurity, which as defined by the US government is lack of access to enough nutritious food to live a healthy, active life. And so what we do at the Alliance is raise awareness around the issues of hunger, both in the United States and around the world. Today, I'll be focusing on hunger in the US. And, you know, at this time of year, I'm so happy that there is a heightened awareness of hunger with Thanksgiving. You know, around this time, people are really aware that not everyone has enough food around the table. And so we find at this time of year, people love to give to their local food pantries and food charities, and we certainly encourage that. But what we know at the Alliance to End Hunger, and Feeding America will tell us, they're one of the members of the Alliance, and they're the umbrella organizations for food banks and food pantries in the US, is that charity isn't enough. So that for every one bag of groceries that can be distributed through the Feeding America network in the US, SNAP, or food, used to be known as food stamps, can distribute 9. So in other words, charity is important, and we should continue to do all of those charitable efforts to make sure that people who need food today have food today, but it cannot match the power and the reach of the government to solve the issue of hunger in the US. So that's why at the Alliance, we focus on advocacy, and we come together as a coalition to really push, you know, certain measures that will reduce hunger and improve nutrition, as well as, you know, call out the root causes of hunger in the US.
Give me a little bit of an insight as to where we are as far as hunger and food insecurity. We know that there was a huge challenge before COVID, and we know that COVID has further exacerbated the issue of hunger and food insecurity. We saw so many people out receiving food packages, food distributions, things of that nature during the COVID pandemic. And it seems as though for a country that seems to be doing so well in terms of having money and capital that many of its population still suffers in this area. And it's almost like, unconscionable.
Absolutely, it is unconscionable. It is unacceptable that in such a wealthy nation, even with the challenges we've been going through since the pandemic, that there is still hunger. And so before, I think we do have to thank you for calling out the pandemic, because we do have to talk about things pre and post pandemic, because the pandemic really was such a significant economic shock, and really did create, obviously, a health crisis, which impacted millions, but as well as an economic crisis and a hunger crisis. And we did see those long lines of cars outside of food banks. But the other thing we saw was that people stepped up, just outpouring of support from people who had the resources to assist in those charitable efforts. And that was a really beautiful thing to see. And so food pantries were able to really expand their efforts to help meet that need. But the other thing we saw during the pandemic was Congress and the administration step up in significant ways. And there were a number of things that they did to mitigate the food crisis that we saw. So there were food supply chain disruptions that we saw, where farmers were not able, because restaurants were closed and schools were closed, were not able to move the food that they would normally move. Food was dying and, just going to waste in the fields. Milk was getting dumped. Well, the government stepped in and created channels for that food to be able to get to needy people. So they did things like that, but they also expanded SNAP benefits, and they made sure to create a new program called Pandemic EBT, which basically said if you had a child in school who normally got free or reduced price lunch, that family, once the school was closed, got the value of those meals to be able to purchase food at the supermarket. So that helped families get through that crisis, because all of a sudden children are home and their food costs went up. Also, we saw food costs go up in general. So there were lots of economic shocks, but measures like that made a huge difference for families, and were really very timely. So definitely want to give credit to Congress and the administration for taking those kinds of steps. They also relaxed a lot of rules around the food distribution programs to make sure that people were able to access SNAP, access WIC, and the other food programs. So where we are right now is that, hunger is still very high, in the sense that there are approximately, almost 40 million people in the US who are suffering from food insecurity. However, what we saw when the USDA measures food insecurity every year, so we have those statistics. What we saw when the statistics for 2020 came out was that the food insecurity rate was not as high as we all feared, because of many of the things that did happen, actions by individuals to step up, as well as actions by Congress and the administration to step up. There's still much to do, because as you mentioned, before the pandemic, we had unacceptable levels of food insecurity in the US. We also have a serious issue of racial inequity when it comes to food. I talk about it as the racial hunger gap. And so I could tell you that if we look at just the sheer numbers of people who are food insecure in the US, the whites will be the largest population based on their numbers. However, if we look at the percent of people within different race populations and that are facing food insecurity, we do see a significant crisis among Black, Indigenous, and communities of color. So Indigenous communities have about 25% food insecure. Black communities have about 22% food insecurity. Latino households have about 18% food insecurity, whereas white households have about 7% food insecurity. And so we do see those racial gaps which have held historically. And so one of the things that hasn't happened in terms of the recovery of the pandemic is really closing those racial gaps. And luckily, this administration is committed to closing those racial gaps, and we do see some opportunities for improvement in the future. But that has been a significant issue because structural racism is a root cause of hunger and poverty in communities of color.
Yeah. So taking all that into account, I know that there has to be some recommendations and some things that you as an organization are actually doing. And so I know that one of the things is that Build Back Better plan. And so can you give us a little bit more insight into the Build Back Better plan and how this also plays into the whole issue of hunger and making our country and our world a better place?
Absolutely. So we are very supportive at the Alliance of the Build Back Better plan. We're so thrilled that the House finally passed what was a 2.2 trillion spending plan. It now has to go over to the Senate. So there's still a tremendous amount of work to do to get this over the finish line. And we are encouraging our allies, the organizations that are part of our network, and just the general public to really support this bill because it has a number of important anti-poverty and anti-hunger provisions. And so the bill itself is huge, and I'm not an expert in the entirety of the bill. A big chunk of it is for battling climate change. There's also, which hopefully will, add new jobs to the economy, which we're looking forward to, but also expanded healthcare and improving the social safety net overall. So the bill offers like universal pre-K, establishes subsidies for childcare, establishes a lot more money for housing. And so all of those things, because hunger in the US is an economic issue. We don't have some of the issues that plague countries around the world where they may have conflict that's sort of causing a hunger crisis, or may not have adequate infrastructure to move the food that's grown to the populations and have markets that are working. That's not our issue in the US. In the US, we have enough food, we have markets that work, we have a safety net. What we have is an economic challenge with families whose bills are too high. And so that when they're looking at their housing budget, that the food piece is the most fungible piece. And so they pay the rent first, then they pay the utilities, they pay those medical bills, buy those prescription drugs. And then, what's left over may not always be adequate for nutritious food. And so the fact that this bill will significantly help families economically with all of the different provisions that can provide support for housing, can provide support for childcare, which is significant cost to families, will then free up some money for food. But there are specific nutrition provisions that we are following very closely. I'll mention two. One is expanding what's called summer EBT. So if you know the SNAP program where you get an electronic benefits card to buy groceries, it's the same concept, but specific for summer purchasing meals in the summer. So families that have children that would normally get free or reduced price meals in school, during the summer, they get a boost in benefits, because when children are out of school, they're struggling to make sure that those children have nutritious food. And so there have been some pilot projects. This has been happening in a few states, and it's been very successful with children eating more nutritious foods during the summer and being ready to learn when they go back to school in the fall. So one of the provisions is to expand this program nationwide for 2 years, so that those families with children who get free or reduced price meals have that support during the summer. This would be a game changer, because summer is the hungriest time for children. And so that one is very significant, and we really hope it passes all the way to the end. And then the other piece that I'll mention is, I'm not going to get too technical with it, but there is an opportunity to expand the number of schools across the country that can offer free meals to students. And this would be a 5-year provision. And in addition, states would have the option to make school meals free statewide. And so being from New York City, I'm actually proud to be part of an organization that was behind free school meals for New York City's children, community food advocates. So this has been happening now in New York City for a while, and we've seen the benefits. Schools have less administrative burdens. Parents have to put out less, from their pockets, and it's, they don't have the administrative burdens of filling out the school meal forms. But also, children are eating more meals at school, and these are healthy meals. They're getting better grades because they're better able to concentrate in school. So we're really excited about this passing the Senate and the opportunity for New York State to be able to do this statewide and not just in New York City. So those are two that I'll mention that we're really excited about. But of course, we're excited about things like the child tax credit and other things that will give families more money in their pocket to be able to take care of their families.
Yeah, so much to talk about. We have to bring you back and really go a little bit more in depth. I know you got a playbook and some other things that we really can't get into now, but I do want to get a quick projection from you before we leave. Talk to me just a quick second, because I only have about a minute left, about hunger in 2022. Do we see things getting better, or do we see things getting progressively worse?
I think things are getting better. We have a new administration. They have actually reformulated the SNAP benefit to make sure that the actual benefit better meets food costs. So good things are happening, but we really need this Build Back Better plan to pass to make some really significant changes that would be game changers for families and make sure that families and children have the access to nutrition that they need.
Well, one, thank you so much for being with us, Minerva, and sharing with us a little bit about your organization and the work that you continue to do. Of course, a lot to talk about. We'll see you in the new year and find out how things are going.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. Again, happy holidays.
And happy holidays to you as well. For our viewers, I want you to stay with us. We are going to take a break, and after the break, we'll have another very special guest here on the Social Justice Forums. Welcome back. The communities in the Bronx have made countless contributions to the culture, the fiber, and the fabric of New York City. Yet as a result of decades of underinvestment in the borough, It's experienced some of the worst economic and health ramifications from the pandemic. Now, the Bronx will require investments from the city in both the short and the long term in three key areas: housing, employment, and food justice. This, according to the new council member-elect, Marjorie Velazquez of District 13. She joins us now on the Social Justice Forums. And council member, congratulations and welcome to the Social Justice Forum.
Thank you so much. It feels really, really, really good to hear it. It still shocks me.
Yeah, I mean, it feels real, right? I think that you're on the cusp. You'll be sworn in come January. But talk to us about what that feeling is like, really, for you being able to be now the council member of District 13.
Well, I'm still feeling it, right? Part of it is extreme excitement. It's historic in that I will be the first person of color, given that my family came in from Puerto Rico directly into this district. And now I'm going to represent the same district that gave me and my family an opportunity. And now, just like that experience for all the families that are coming here, with that experience, now we can build this different quilt, if you will, of District 13 and showcase what Latina leadership looks like and how we could all work together and our experiences unite us. It doesn't divide us. And so giving that exciting opportunity and just letting folks understand how historic this is. And here we are, 2021, full circle. Can't wait.
So share with us a little bit from your perspective about where things are with regards to housing. I know that housing is a big issue in your district. We see the development of housing and the question about affordable housing. But give us your perspective on what you're seeing as far as your district, and how would you like to see the housing issue play out?
Well, for folks, we have several. So this district varies, right? We have apartment buildings in certain sections of the district, and certainly other sections are either single family homes or multiple family dwelling units. And so having that opportunity to have that conversation, especially with single family homeowners who have had challenging times during COVID, those families that have been impacted by the hurricane with Ida, understanding that those changes that need to happen, right? With climate change, are they protected? Are we looking at our sewers correctly? Have we been holding the city accountable with not only the cleanup, but the construction that led to that? Is our infrastructure ready for more development is also a question that we really have to take the city to task, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, and when we look at development in your area, are you satisfied with what you're seeing in terms of, is it overdevelopment or is it underdevelopment when you look at your district?
Certainly, there are areas of our district which don't have the infrastructure to sustain any development, right? And so we need to really work with the community and see what those challenges are before we go ahead and try to talk about development. And it is literally sitting down, knocking on doors, just like I did, right? It is a campaign to make sure that families are aware of their opportunities into housing. And my dream, my goal, is to have families own their properties, own their condos, own their co-ops, own their apartments, because home ownership allows for the development of generational wealth.
Yeah, and when we talk about home ownership, so many people in the Bronx talk about property value and the property value and the quality of life, and how quality of life is really, it can play an important part in improving a person's home value or deteriorating the home value. When you look about the quality of life in the area, what do you see?
There are challenges, right? Where we're looking at making sure that our streets are clean, making sure that our potholes are filled. Those are priorities of mine. Also, when we're working with our small businesses, it's not just to let them survive. We need to invest in them and make sure that they thrive. And by that, I can't handle having empty storefronts, right? I don't want my folks to go to Westchester. I don't need my folks to go to Long Island for stuff that they can get here. And it is convincing folks that we can do this together. And it's not going to be an easy task. But you know what? My small businesses deserve that. And my small businesses deserve a champion that will go door to door to our businesses and say, how can we do this together? It is also making sure that the bids that are here have a voice, and that they are working together with the different merchant groups, right? It's all of us. It's on all of us. It's not a one person thing, because that's not what I ran on. I ran on everyone being invested in here, because if we're not investing in ourselves, then what are we really doing?
Yeah. Really getting your voice out there, getting a chance to talk to the public and the community. You've always been in the community. And I know that one of the issues that we're talking about is this issue of food insecurity, because as we saw COVID running rampant, we saw more and more people actually coming out, needing food. Some people just, the issue of hunger and food insecurity. Give us your assessment as to what you're seeing with food insecurity, and then we'll talk about how we can handle it.
So it's still here. Just because the rates of COVID are changing doesn't mean that the need has changed, right? If anything, we've seen an increase because of the pandemic having this real shock into our economy. And families have lost jobs. Families are still struggling to find meaningful, well-paying jobs, right? And so what we really need to look forward to, and this is something that I look forward to working with my federal and state electeds, is making sure that we're accessing our families and making sure that we're providing fresh, whole, great, good foods where they can be met, right? Looking at our community-based schools as a start. During the pandemic, we were giving out these ready-to-go meals from our schools. What are we doing now for our children? How do we address our children not only in the beginning of the school day, making sure that they have their breakfast, their lunch, but what are they taking home? Can we work together with our families and provide a pantry within schools, provide, I know right here in the Bronx, we have a couple of organizations that every Wednesday and Saturday, right, out of St. Benedict's, provide food for our families, right? So let's do that. Let's keep that, making sure that we're fully funding our pantries, making sure that we're working with our religious institutions, right? A lot of folks that I've seen during the pandemic turn to their churches for assistance. So having that conversation with our different clergy members to make sure that we're working together. Once again, this is not a me thing. This is an all us thing. And so unfortunately, the reality is the pandemic has left us with a lot to clean up, but we're here for it. And no person should ever go hungry. So please understand, if you are out there and you need food, there are resources within the city. Feel free to contact our office at 347-878-2026. We will connect you. Also, there are a lot of groups out there not only handing out meals, right? We have city meals that really does help our seniors that are homebound. And then you have several other groups out there. So we could always help connect. You should not go hungry. And we are here invested in making sure that you are whole.
Any concern on your part? I know you haven't taken office yet, but I know that sometimes when we have these budget cuts across the city and access to resources, whether it's on a state level or on a city level, sometimes these organizations that really got these boots on the ground, the grassroots organizations that are really impacting people, sometimes are the first ones that end up on the cutting line. Any concern on your end that as we enter the 2022, that we may not be necessarily we may lose focus of where we are in this area?
Certainly, we've been blessed because of the investment, the federal investment. So we did get a lot of money from the federal government that is going to come our way. As you've seen, President Biden has been able to help us out in that these packages that have recently been signed do allow for the investment back into our state. Which will roll into our city and definitely into our district, because as folks know, I am an accountant, so I know how to make sure that our district is getting the best of the best. But you are right. Oftentimes people look to cut, but let me let you know, it won't be cut for me. What we're doing is making sure that our families come first and making sure that we are really invested in our families. And it takes a lot, it takes a village, but I look forward to working with all our partners, right, in state and federal government to make sure that we are whole, to make sure that our families do not go hungry, that they are unhoused. None of that is going to happen, right? We are working diligently to make sure that families are protected, because at the end of the day, we are in the holiday season, and it really should bring back the focus as to why we are here in these offices. It's to make sure that our families have a roof over their heads, food on the table, that they are clothed, and we should be working towards that goal for all our families.
Well, I know I want to revisit what you spoke about earlier. When you spoke about things, you spoke about the possibility of people taking their business to Long Island, taking their business to Westchester, and even, let's be honest, New Jersey and Connecticut. When people aren't satisfied with finding resources at home, they actually go abroad. You spoke a little bit about having people being able to patronize small business. We know that small business is the lifeblood. It's the lifeblood of America, the city, and it's the lifeblood of our borough. What do you see in terms of being able to improve small businesses and to be able to get them up to speed so that way our communities can become more viable?
Well, it's working with banks to make sure that we're providing meaningful grants and opportunities, loans when we're educating our small businesses on loans and grants that are out there, making sure that they have access, right? We need to make our access and opportunities more equitable to our small businesses. We need to be meaningful. We're meaning to go out there door to door to our small businesses and say, this is what is out there. This is how we're going to do it together. Also making sure that the agencies that are assigned to our small businesses are not just at first finding and giving our businesses penalties without giving them a good amount of time to make whole, right? It's one thing that there is an incident and you need to find them, but did you walk through the business and understand that? Did the agency make it proper? And it's holding these agencies accountable, and that's what I'm looking forward to. It's having these really tough conversations with our small businesses and the agencies, because what we saw during the pandemic were that 1 minute one agency was in charge of this, the next day this agency was in charge of that, and it's confusing to anyone. And certainly during the pandemic, having agencies compete against each other. And then on top of that, you're going to ask an owner who is dealing with hiring new folks to deal with all these changing agencies and how were they educated on these changes, who assigned them. These are the conversations that we really need to have with our small businesses. And were they given a proper opportunity to make whole? And most of the times it's not. And that's why I rallied with actually a couple of weeks ago with the Latino Restaurant Association when we were saying that these fines have to be better. When we're looking at SLA, right? And that's not a city agency, that is a state agency. And we need to be better with our small restaurants when we're talking about how they just stopped. Remember the alcohol to go, that there is a process that is not helping our small businesses. We really visit these processes to make sure that it is something that my businesses can do and do better. It's not just literally dumping things on them last minute as well. And, when we're looking at the board of SLA, making sure that it's someone from within the business that understands the challenges, right? You just can't keep on having just folks that don't identify within the business trying to set these rules for a business. It just doesn't work. And so we have to make sure that these changes within SLA happen so that way our small businesses, our small restaurants thrive.
Are you optimistic, given the fact that we will be seeing a new mayoral administration as you get set to take office? A new mayor will actually take office. And a lot of optimism has been said with regards to Eric Adams by way of services and understanding the culture and the dynamic of the outer boroughs. How do you feel about the new mayor coming in? And are you optimistic that you'll be able to accomplish a lot of things?
So I've had the opportunity to meet the incoming mayor, and I like the fact that he wants to work with us. He wants to understand what the district needs are and be here. And that's the first part, right? You got a great partner when they show up, and him being here, him understanding the district and knowing the district is the first step. The next step is, how do we hold him accountable and how do we make sure that the agencies are delivering? And that's something I want to work with him on. And it's just a continuing conversation and making sure that he just doesn't miss it one time, it's multiple times. And I look forward to it.
Yeah. And so for you, first priority when you get into office, what are you looking to do?
Oh, good stuff, right? When we're looking at making sure that our families are made whole, it's looking at kind of like what you mentioned, right? Looking at our small businesses, making sure that we're providing avenues for them to thrive. That means meeting with them one-on-one, which I have been doing, meeting with the different agencies and having that conversation. Also meeting with the different banks that are within our district. What we have seen is a lot of our brick and mortar banks have been disappearing, and it's led to actually smaller banks coming up. So why is it that our largest banks are leaving, but these smaller ones are coming up and staying? That's a conversation we also have to have in making sure that there's real opportunities, not only for our small businesses that the banks will help, but it's also giving my senior citizens an access to go to drop off and make their deposits and their cash withdrawals, right? It's having that one-on-one, and removing a large bank out of the blue doesn't help us. It's making sure that we're really taking care of our businesses, but also our folks, right? Our senior citizens that have lived their lives here, that should have their services met, and we're not taking things away. Also, when we're looking at funding for our senior centers, I want to make sure that we're not only restoring it, but that we're providing meaningful programs, right? I have a lot of great active seniors who love their Zumba classes. So I'd like to go ahead, not only dance with them with the Zumba, but it's also making sure that the programs fit. When we're looking at our children, making sure that they are having the best access. This is the first time our schools are going to be fully funded. What does that look like? Are we really going to do programs that invest not only in them and their education, but we're looking at their full-on development, making sure that the after-school programs really mean something to them, and not only them and their parents, but also what can the community do to build up on that. And I am so excited. I am going to have an Orchard Beach and the pavilion coming up, making sure that that process and that development continues strong, and working together with Borough President Vanessa Gibson, and making sure that our families have a great time and having the programs there. So that way, we're not looking at Orchard Beach as a summer destination, but we're looking at it as a year-long destination, and that we have meaningful programs for all.
Well, I say it, there's a new mayor that's coming in, Eric Adams, a new borough president, Vanessa Gibson, and a new counselor in District 13, Marjorie Velazquez. Congratulations again. Happy holidays. Great to have you here on the Social Justice Forums and hearing what you see coming up for your district. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
All righty. Listen, we got more show. We don't encourage you, please don't go anywhere. We're talking more on the Social Justice Forums. We'll be back. Just going to take a quick break.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
welcome back to the show. 3 men are found guilty in the felony murder of the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery. Also in other news, the jury declared Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty on the 5 charges he faced after fatally shooting 2 people and wounding a third in the night of unrest in Kenosha, Wisconsin, after 27 hours of deliberation over the course of 4 days. Joining us now to share more is the founding CEO of Atlas, Michael Blake. And Michael, good to have you here with us as well. And, a trying time because on one side you've got what some feel is justice on one side, injustice on the other. Just give me your thoughts as what you know.
Daren, always good to be with you. And of course, we're grateful for everyone in their leadership. You know, it is definitely hard to ignore the deeper dynamics that are happening still in our society. And as Brother Reverend Senator Warnock said, we're battling 2 pandemics of COVID-19 and COVID-19. And these cases are another reflection of that. You know, Kyle Rittenhouse is a murderer, period. And the reality is, because of absolutely archaic legislation in Wisconsin, which deemed that the weapon he was holding, the gun he was holding, should not be seen as a gun because it was a short barrel rifle, leading to him not being charged in claiming self-defense, which I don't understand. How do you shoot and kill people and all of a sudden claim self-defense afterwards in that kind of incident is appalling. And it was, unfortunately, Darren, I think for many of us, you look at it and you almost weren't surprised when you saw how the judge was going out of his way to help Kyle Rittenhouse. And then you realize and see the news afterwards of Kyle Rittenhouse hanging out with the former president in Mar-a-Lago and clearly showing you that he is demonstrating to you once again what he really believes and his mindset there. As it relates to Ahmaud Arbery, that's justice. I mean, if you're jogging, if you're walking, if you're living and you're Black, you almost have to be afraid when you go outside. But we only have a chance when justice occurs, and holding these murderers accountable is exactly what has to happen. But as we know, there's always that more needs to be done. And it's important that we turn the anger into action and the protest into process. And that's what we saw in both of these cases in different manners. Now, the reality also is, though, you have to find more ways to change the laws so that you don't have a situation like Rittenhouse where you get off because of the foolishness of claiming that a gun is not a gun.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the bottom line. When you think about where we are right now, we are where we are with Rittenhouse because of laws and antiquated legislation that somebody can hold on to, that could use in a time and a place such as in the Rittenhouse case to be able to create a defense that could actually get a person such as him off. I want to talk a little bit about this conversation, though, because when you talk about Rittenhouse and the verdict, what I did say is that for many people who thought that, Black Lives Matter or people were just being pro-Black, in the Rittenhouse case, the people who lost their lives weren't African-American. However, what you did find were African-Americans who said, listen, it's not about being so much pro-Black as much as it's being pro-justice in this moment. And that's all the people were actually seeking, was just justice.
I should be able to live and survive in America. That's all we're saying right now. It's really not that hard, right? Like, I should be able to know that I can go to a protest and make it home alive. I should be able to know that I can walk, I can jog, I can be outside and make it home. And at the end of the day, and this is why we're teaching this at Monroe College. We have a class around social justice. I'll talk about myself, President Mark Jerome, and Joy Tolliver, our general counsel. We do this Tuesdays and Thursdays from 5 to 6. We talk about civil injustice all the time. You have to change the laws and then enforce fair laws to have justice. Because at the end of the day, if Kyle Rittenhouse was Black, he would either be dead or convicted.
All right. There's no two ways about it. I mean, when you look at it, you know exactly how that would be. If you were African-American walking around, and we've seen videos prior to this of, somebody suspected of a gun and the treatment that they have when being suspected of a gun. You see a gentleman, not even a gentleman, a 17-year-old kid who's actually walking around with a gun. And I think the thing that angers most people is this is a kid who doesn't have the legal right. He crossed the state lines. His mother drove him in, and he still gets off. And we can say only in America, like Don King.
I just want to make sure we also, to that point, they make it very plain to folks on the block, right? So most people probably couldn't tell you the name of their neighbor who lives down the hall, probably couldn't tell you the name of the person that runs the bodega or the shop around the block. And the argument that they were making is that Kyle Rittenhouse had to cross state lines to defend someone else's store is laughable, ignorant, and flies in the face of common sense. And if we make it all the way real, do any of us believe that if you're African-American, Caribbean, Latino, Asian, young 17-year-old, walk down the street right now with an assault rifle, that the cops would just say, keep on going?
Right.
And so when we think about this, the nuances of how often laws have been used against the disadvantage of Black people, there's a perfect example, because they made the argument that due to him, yes, being under 18, but treating it that it was a short barrel rifle and therefore should not classify as a gun. It's that focus where you have to say, we have to change the law to give us a chance for fairness. Equally though, Daren, it's also about making sure that people are engaged in the political process, because this judge had run unopposed for years. So use this moment, like we saw what happened in Ferguson with Mike Brown, where a decision was made by the people on the ground to run for office, to change the laws, to demand change. Here in New York, similar dynamic. What did we do? We saw what happened with George Floyd and how he was murdered, and I call it the modern day Emmett Till. Say change the laws when it comes to criminal justice and bail reform and speedy trial and open discovery and all the different elements that have to happen there. You think about what occurred down with Ahmaud Arbery. In large part, we know, unfortunately, these instances continue to occur. But when you have people that are being charged for recording of the murders, recording the injustice, it is laughable, it is silly, it is incredulous, and it has to change. And at the end of the day, what we are watching right now is, in many minds, the last frontier of what is going on with white supremacy and white privilege, where people are feeling that we are going to do anything possible to go after these Black and brown communities for you feeling empowered. If you believe that I'm wrong with that, ask yourself, if your child was Kyle Rittenhouse, would he be home alive right now?
Yeah. And, I want to talk a little bit further about the details of the case. I'll go to the Arbery case, where you have, prosecutors, or I should say defense attorneys, who want to make references to dirty toenails and talking about that and the victimization and the shaming that goes on of the victim in order to try to get an acquittal. And when it comes to, people in communities of color, we have to be prepared, unfortunately, for this kind of victim shaming that is all too unfortunate, all too heinous in some senses, to know that, I remember Trayvon Martin having to go through the same thing, that anytime that there is a case that it really involves an African-American and people in communities of color, and you're going up against the establishment, so to speak, and a white person, there always has to be this case of victim shaming, which I want you to speak to.
So I should never be in a space where you're making me feel bad after you hurt me.
Right.
And so when we watch what is happening right now, the fact that I'm afraid if I'm recording what happened with Eric Garner, I'm afraid when I'm recording what's happening with George Floyd, I'm afraid in what's happening with these different accounts. What mindset are we communicating to the people if we're saying to you, don't be transparent when it comes to justice? And so there has to be protections in place for those that are willing to be the whistleblowers when injustice occurs. There have to be the protections in place to say enough is enough. But it's also about just the mindset. And I think sometimes when we're talking about the recordings, when we're talking about what's happening in these different communities, let's just go back to the humanity. There are white men who decided, I'm going to kill this black man, period. Fundamentally. Like, and I think at the end of the day, when we start like ignoring the other mindset of this, right? We see what happened with George Floyd. A white male cop kept his knee, knowing that this could hurt, damage, destroy, potentially kill a black man, and he thought that was okay. And at the end of the day, it is time for us to put more attention and hold the oppressor accountable rather than the oppressed. And this is the moment that we have going into 2022, especially because as we reflect at the end of December, going into December, into 2022, so many elections and laws have the impact of being changed that it is important that we put more time and attention on what are we doing to transform these communities for the better and give protection for those that are willing to speak out, as opposed to maintaining laws that will actually hurt you and harm you in many ways. You know, and I go back to the Ahmaud Arbery example one final time. The premise of it is not just the impact of what occurred on that day, but it is the mindset that when you go outside, do I believe I'll get home alive? And if we are not in a space where I will be protected for doing the right things, that I will say out loud, what you're doing is wrong, and I will know that the laws are on my side, we are failing our societies. And we have a responsibility as those that have a voice to demand that the laws will actually transform for the better in very concrete ways.
You talk about laws. I want to shift gears for a minute, talk about 2022. As we look at legislation, particularly here in New York, we know that we've been talking about bail reform, criminal justice reform. There is something on the table talking about the dangerous when it comes to bail reform, looking at the fact that those persons that are, could possibly receive bail or should have their bail, totally dismissed, may not have that opportunity under a possible new legislation.
So I want to make sure we're all on the same page about this critical moment that is approaching us. So when those of us had the opportunity to change the laws around criminal justice in the wake of George Floyd, in the wake of Ahmaud Arbery, in the wake of the injustice that has happened for centuries in this country, we changed bail reform. We focused on speedy trial. We focused on open discovery. We did the things so that you actually had a chance in a true society, that I'm innocent until proven guilty. Now, something that is emerging in a lot of conversations is an effort called dangerousness of should a judge have the ability to determine that I believe that this alleged assailant is dangerous to the community and therefore you should not have bail. Dangerousness is something we removed because we were sick and tired of Black and brown folk being seen as dangerous because some judge assumed you were dangerous. And if you needed another reminder of this, look at Kyle Rittenhouse's example. A judge determined that this murderer in Kyle Rittenhouse was okay, didn't have a gun, shouldn't be charged in this way. When does that happen for our communities? When does that happen for our kids? And so in that premise point, it is very important to use your voices to demand to state legislators in the state Senate, state assembly, to the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, comptroller on down. Do not include dangerousness within any legislation that is happening around bail reform. Now, Daren, do I believe that you can have conversations about how you can have improvements on the bill that we passed? Absolutely. That's for any bill. Any bill can have room for improvement. Specifically, do I think that there are some very serious charges that absolutely should be considered in terms of what happens in providing bail? Yes, I think that's a very fair conversation that has to happen. But let's be very clear. Anyone who says that they support a judge having the ability to assess dangerousness is going to lead to Black and Latino people going to jail. And you have to ask yourself, do you stand on the side of legislators who would rather build schools or build jails? Do you stand on the side of legislators who actually want to see you for your destiny as opposed to seeing you as dangerous?
I want to take a quick minute. Only have about 2 minutes left for us in our conversation, but I want to talk about Eric Adams, new incoming mayor for New York City. Are you optimistic when it comes to the issue of criminal justice reform and these matters of quality of life and crime? As a former New York City police officer, do you feel that he'll be able to adequately do the job when it comes to the quality of life issues?
Do I think so? I'll separate the two. For quality of life, certainly, I definitely think that we have to focus on the economic conditions first and foremost in our communities. At the end of the day, if someone has a job and good wages, they're not having to worry about other challenges that are happening in their communities. That, to me, is the impact of it. Yes, people want to see their garbage picked up. Yes, they want to see transportation running on time, but everybody wants a job and a quality home that's protecting them. When it comes to criminal justice, I include Mayor-elect Adams in that conversation because from comments that have been made, he has been communicating that he wants an openness around the conversation of dangerousness for the legislators. That is the legislature's decision, not his. And I think fundamentally that is wrong. I think it is absolutely wrong to go down the road in any manner of doing that. That said, we need to focus on changing the conditions for these young brothers, young sisters, before they are being incarcerated, before they're interacting with the cop. And so to me, addressing how do you have greater opportunities as it relates to food security in our communities makes things easier. Addressing what's happening so you have an opportunity for home ownership and to have those protections of not having to be evicted. Addressing what's going on with your schools so you actually have true hybrid learning. All those pieces make it easier so we're not talking about that kid interacting with the criminal justice system. And lastly, work with the legislators to say, what are we doing to actually give these communities a chance so that if you do interact with the criminal justice system, you're not feeling like you're a lost cause. You should not make it easier for Kyle Rittenhouse to get off and then get off a plane and go visit Donald Trump. You should be making it easier for Black and brown kids that live in New York to have a second chance.
Yeah. Michael Blake, we're going to leave it there, brother. But of course, always good to have you here on the show. And of course, happy holidays to you. Hope to catch you in the new year so we can discuss this and a whole lot more. Thanks, bro.
Absolutely, Daren. Blessings to your family. Happy holidays to everyone.
Same to you as well. All right, everybody, I want to let you know that we have come to the end of our show today. Thank you for spending the time with us here on the Social Justice Forums. We hope that you get an opportunity to really take some of this stuff and take it to heart. Now, if you want to rewatch today's episode, you can catch Recablecast here on BronxNet channel 67. Also, you can go to BronxNet.org. You can see it on the website as well. Now, if you want to join the conversation, present your point of view, please don't forget to join us on our social media platforms at BronxNet TV. Join us next week. We're going to continue to elevate the discussion, bringing news, awareness, the things that you need to know with regards to the issues that so many people are dealing with here on the Social Justice Forums. I'm Daren Jaime saying take care and God bless.